We are back with Eduardo Tapia discussing some legal issues here about real estate in Mexico, real estate in Cabo. And Eduardo, I know you mentioned there were some issues that came up with regards to escrow. Can you just kind of elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, certainly. Obviously, the use of escrow is not as widespread in Mexico as it is in the U.S. or Canada, simply because of the nature of the transaction. In Mexico, basically what we had up until recently is the notary public also intervened as far as the handling of monies. The deed could actually say either that the funds had been received prior to the transaction to the full satisfaction of the seller, or that in front of the notary, the money or the check was exchanged, and they basically had what we call fe pública or public faith in order to have that part of the transaction go through smoothly. However, the problems that arose from notary publics intervening in that fashion, they basically scaled back and said, well, I'd rather not disclose that part as a notary public and have the individual parties be the responsible ones to say either if the funds had been delivered, they had to disclose the bank account into which it was deposited, or if it was a check, the number of the check and the bank. So it became more difficult and cumbersome for the notary. Say they basically said, I do not want to be part of that transaction. So as far as the handling of the monies, so that's where the escrow part comes in, because it's always a tricky part when the seller says, give me my money now. I'm handing you the deed, I'm signing the deed in front of the notary public, where is my money? And by the same token, the buyer says, well, I'm not going to give you the money until you sign the deed, so what comes first, right? So it's either having people in a conference room, someone calling the bank and saying, hey, are the funds there? And we basically have physical people there and say, okay, let's go ahead and sign. And it sometimes gets tricky because depending on the hour of the day, sometimes the transactions don't go in the same day, and you can't have people waiting until the next day there to have funds cleared. So that's why the escrow has become, for practical purposes, the better option. It's a nominal fee that you pay between $500 to $700 for a third party to handle those fees. It can either be in Mexico. There's a company in Mexico City that handles escrows in pesos and dollars, or it can be in the U.S. and they handle dollars, and then they transact that so they can send funds to Mexico, and whatever the exchange rate is, that's how the money goes in. But either way, it's better using escrow simply because let's say you're not even at the point of signing the deed. You're in the initial stages of the negotiation and you want to do a due diligence. And so you obviously want to have money that is returnable if the property is not proper, if it has any type of liens or encumbrances or security interest or attachments. So it's basically a security blanket for the buyer saying, look, I'm a serious buyer. I'm putting up 5K, 10K of the purchase price towards a 30-day or 45-day due diligence period, and it should be fully returnable. If those funds go directly to the seller rather than an escrow company, then you're kind of in a position where if something does not bode proper to you as the buyer, you have to basically ask the seller, and if the seller says no, I'm gonna use this money towards a purchase price, they kind of strong arm the buyer into a position that they shouldn't be pressured into, and they say, well, yeah, there might be a lien on that, but we're going to take care of it between now and closing, which is typically now probably about a 3-month affair. And in that sense also, escrow is helpful because then you simply just ask the escrow company, as far as the escrow agreement goes, to make it fully refundable, and that way you you avoid all these problems with the seller. And then if the percentage of the purchase price is agreed upon to be delivered in certain amount of time, let's say you have 20% going in 30 days after the due diligence period, everything should go into escrow. That is going to be then delivered to the seller at closing. And so everything is just smoother. And once the parties sign, the parties can freely sign the deed, knowing that the funds are out of the hands of the buyer. They're with the escrow, and as long as the escrow agent receives a letter from the notary public saying that the transaction has been signed by all parties, and the all parties is also important just as a side note. It's obviously buyer, seller, and if there's a trustee involved, normally if there's a trust with foreigners, the trustee delegate can sign afterwards, because they normally sign, depending on their schedule. Sometimes they do take maybe a week to sign after the parties, but at least the funds, are delivered to the seller by the escrow company by way of that letter from the notary saying, hey, everything is signed.
Awesome. And just to elaborate on that, when we use escrow, generally, I like this company out of Austin, Texas, and I've heard people say, hey, use a US-based company versus a company in Mexico. Is there any truth to that, or is there any advantage to using a US-based escrow company?
I guess it's just, yeah, I know which company you're referring to. I've used that with clients. They do a good job. It's just more a matter of convenience. There's really not a benefit of using the escrow company out of the U.S. And it's because, again, it's a factor of trust. The one that I've used in Mexico is actually owned by a group out of London, and so it's a very serious outfit that they have going. And the advantage to you, the one in Mexico, is because of pesos, and it's directly, and you don't have to worry about the exchange rate, especially because escrow also handles the closing cost, and so you can put closing costs either with the attorney of record as buyer's counsel, which I sometimes do that, or with the, in this case, the escrow company that handles funds for the notary. So they comprise taxes, they comprise dues or derechos, and those have to be paid under law in pesos. So that's why sometimes it gets tricky. If in 3 months' time the exchange rate is such of fluctuation, then it's not sometimes even recommended to have those funds in dollars, rather just saying, okay, let's convert it now. Sometimes it is better to use that escrow company out of Mexico City, but generally, they do a good job. The one in Austin, and they've been very aggressive to get more of a market share. And yeah, but they're competent, and so. But as far as an actual specific benefit, they don't have that one over the one in
Okay, because I was working with an agent, and anybody can say anything, but she was trying to explain that don't use a escrow company based in Mexico, because let's say like you put 20% down in escrow, and then you're doing, if you want it back, there'll be some sort of delay, if you don't come to agreement, there'll be some sort of delay in getting your money back, where in the US-based one will get that. That's pretty much not true at all.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it depends on the individual experiences, but generally there should be a delay because those funds are on deposit. It's not a matter, I'm guessing that the delay would be something tax related, saying, hey, this is an income. Well, it isn't, because it was basically some sort of like a retainer, and if it didn't happen, then you basically have to deliver it back, and that's the nature of that agreement. So I mean, it's just a matter of having those documents in place and not having to worry about the time frame that takes. It should be longer. I mean, I don't know what the experience was, but there's no benefit in that, and it could be as quick in the U.S. or